For decades, we've watched history unfold without noticing one crucial truth. Some figures do not rise because of ambition, they rise because of design. Today, we examine a pattern so precise, so unsettling, and so consistently repeated throughout time that calling it a coincidence is no longer an option. If you think you understand how power really works, pay close attention. What you're about to discover may change the way you see the world forever. There are names that appear once in history, and there are others that seem to repeat themselves, as if following an invisible pattern. In the second half of the 20th century, in one of the most powerful cities in the world, a man was born. A man who would eventually move forces few could truly understand. To some, he was simply an ambitious businessman. To others, a media figure. And later, one of the most influential power figures on the planet. But what many fail to see is the network of coincidences, hidden connections, and unsettling patterns that surround his story. This is not a political documentary. It is not about parties, ideologies, or personal opinions. This is an observation based on dates, records, documented links, and patterns that, when analyzed together, raise an unsettling question. Are there individuals whose lives seem to follow a design that goes beyond coincidence? This man did not come from nowhere. He was born into a powerful family connected to major urban development, large-scale business, and elite circles few ever access. From a young age, he was surrounded by wealth, influence, power, and access to places most people never enter. The most disturbing part begins when certain numbers, dates, and locations connected to his life are examined. Addresses, buildings, financial records, properties, and key moments in his timeline repeatedly point to the same sequence, the number 88. In many ancient cultures, 88 is not just a number. It is associated with power, infinity, expansion, dominance, and the construction of empires. But the coincidences go far beyond numerology. One of the most iconic buildings associated with his name was built on top of a historic location filled with symbolic architecture. That place contained elements linked to ancient knowledge, coded meanings, and secret traditions known only to a few. During its demolition, many of those elements were destroyed without explanation. Why remove symbols that were part of history? Even more mysterious is an almost forgotten detail. Long before this man was even born, certain ancient stories spoke of a wealthy young figure living in a great tower in a powerful city, guided by a mysterious mentor, preparing for a future role of great influence. Although these accounts belonged to fiction, the similarities with modern reality are unsettling. But it does not stop in books. In the real world, records show that this man was connected to individuals who later became involved in secret investigations, international scandals, experimental technologies, and hidden power networks. Business magnates, scientists, investors tied to advanced projects, individuals with indirect links to intelligence agencies. None of this, by itself, proves anything. But taken together, a pattern begins to appear. For years, he repeated that he was meant to do something of great importance. And when he finally reached the center of global power, his rise was as unlikely as it was shocking. Against logic, against predictions, against analysis, he rose to a position few humans ever reach. The real question is not how he did it. The real question is, was it coincidence? Or, like in so many ancient stories, was it part of a plan that began long before the world even knew he existed? In this documentary, we do not judge. We observe. We analyze. We connect the dots. And the deeper we go, the clearer one chilling idea becomes. This figure is not just a person. He is a pattern. And we are only beginning to see it. To better understand this pattern, we must observe the environment in which this figure developed. Great cities do not only gather people. They gather information, resources, decisions, and real power. Since the early 20th century, certain elites have controlled key sectors of the world: real estate, banking, energy, technology, communication, and even politics. But that control has never been entirely visible or democratic. Within these circles, power is not inherited only through money. It is inherited through connections. This figure grew up surrounded by those connections. From a young age, access was granted to people who make decisions far from public view. Private meetings, closed events, exclusive societies, places with no cameras, no journalists, and no official records. What is unsettling is that many of the individuals who appeared around this life later became connected to international investigations, mysterious financial movements, classified projects, secret operations. experimental technologies far ahead of their time. These connections rarely appear in a straight line. Sometimes they cross paths at an event, sometimes in an old photograph, sometimes on the same guest list, repeated over different years, as if they were always in the same place, at the exact right time. Another disturbing coincidence appears when examining the names of certain companies, buildings, foundations, and projects linked to this figure. Some of those names contain ancient symbolism, astronomical references, concepts connected to time, expansion, control, and even the void. Nothing seems random. In ancient elite circles, it was believed that names are codes, and codes shape reality. When a word is repeated enough times, it begins to create a path. For decades, this figure promoted construction projects with a very specific obsession: height. Towers, elevated structures, buildings that dominate the skyline. In many ancient cultures, towers do not represent only wealth or progress. They represent observation, surveillance, control, and dominance over the environment. From above, everything is visible, and whoever sees everything controls more than it seems. Yet the most unsettling pattern appears when examining the dates. Events that defined this life coincide almost perfectly with moments of global crisis, financial collapses, international conflicts, unexpected technological breakthroughs, social unrest, major shifts in power across governments. As the world entered chaos, this figure began to rise, as if chaos were fuel, as if the moment were understood in advance, or as if knowledge existed that the rest of the world did not have access to. Independent researchers have pointed out that certain key decisions made by this figure seem to precede large-scale global events, as if his existence were connected to a silent network that anticipates the future. We do not claim control. We do not claim causation. But the synchronization cannot be ignored. In human history, there are people who do not seek power. Power finds them. And there are others who seem to walk toward it, as if they had been watching it from afar all along, waiting for the perfect moment. This figure showed signs of ambition early on. But ambition alone does not create such a path. The strange part is that every step seems to have been accompanied by the right people, in the right places, at the right times. Nothing chaotic. Everything too aligned. Too perfect to be simple luck. And this is where a new, unsettling question emerges. What if this life is not just a result of personal decisions, but the execution of a script written long ago? What if some individuals do not act alone, but as pieces within a much larger, older, hidden system? Ancient texts, cultures, and philosophies speak of agents of transition, people who emerge when the world enters a new phase. Not to save it, but to change it. Some call them leaders. Others call them disruptors. Some see them as symbols of transformation. But there is another term, rarely spoken: human patterns. And this figure fits that description perfectly. We do not yet know why. We do not fully understand who it is truly connected to. But one thing is becoming clear. This story is not only about power, it is about something that uses power. And the most disturbing part is still to come. If this pattern were exclusive to only one person, it could be explained by luck, ambition, or simple favorable circumstances. But when we observe other cases in history, something far more disturbing appears. This pattern repeats itself. Throughout the centuries, certain figures have emerged during moments of global crisis. Individuals who, without belonging to royal families or visible ancient bloodlines of power, rise rapidly precisely when the world is in chaos. Economic collapses, revolutions, technological transformations. Always, at the most critical point, someone appears, as if the system itself required a specific piece to reorganize the board. In ancient political philosophy, these individuals were called agents of transition, people who do not create chaos, but use it, who do not save the system, but reshape it. And this figure fits that archetype with unsettling precision. Throughout this life, there are moments where seemingly small decisions preceded massive changes on a global scale. We are not speaking of public predictions or prophecies, but of near-perfect synchronizations between personal actions and subsequent world events. In statistics, when events repeat in a consistent and ordered way, they stop being coincidence. They become pattern. That pattern can be found in databases, timelines, press records, historical publications. Everything is there, but fragmented, scattered, buried beneath the overload of global information. Most people never connect those dots. But when they do, the conclusion is unsettling. Another almost ignored element appears in the symbols surrounding this environment. Repeated colors, constant architectural forms, recurring words, geometric figures found in logos, buildings, decorations, all linked to themes of power, expansion, control, and construction. Nothing appears random. The psychology of power teaches that those who seek influence first create symbols. Then they create structure. And finally, they create reality. The most disturbing part is that this figure seems to move between two worlds. The one everyone sees, and another that very few ever witness. A world of closed doors, camera-free rooms, unrecorded meetings, agreements that never appear in official statements. There is no direct proof, but there is too much silence to ignore. In criminology, large patterns are not discovered by what is present, but by what is missing, what disappears, what is omitted. And here, too much is missing. Too many gaps. Too many decisions that do not follow the logic of the public world. It is as if this visible life is only the surface of something hidden, a shadow moving behind the stage. And the more this cycle is studied, the more dangerous a question becomes. What if the decisions we believe are personal are actually part of a larger mechanism? What if certain individuals do not truly choose, but fulfill a specific role within a system we cannot see? Modern science speaks of complex networks, self-organizing systems, and emergent patterns, structures that adapt, protect themselves, and reorganize without visible leadership. Perhaps this was never about one person at all. Perhaps it is about a network, a structure using human faces to operate in the physical world. And within that structure, certain individuals are not leaders. They are key nodes, points where decisions, movements, and consequences converge. And based on all observable records, this figure seems to occupy one of those points with unsettling precision. The point where past and future collide. Where chaos becomes opportunity. Where fear transforms into control. Most of the world will never notice this pattern. But now, you have. And once something is seen, it cannot be unseen. This is not a political statement. It is not an accusation. It is not an empty theory. It is an observation. A pattern repeated throughout human history. And the final question remains. If this is not coincidence, then what comes next? And here is where everything changes. Because if this figure is not just a person, if it is part of a pattern, if it is only a node within a network, then it is not alone. Complex systems do not depend on a single individual. They operate through multiple pieces, multiple faces, multiple nodes. People who appear, disappear, return. People who seem insignificant until, suddenly, they occupy a position of power. People who were never meant to be seen, only used. And the question is no longer who this figure is. The real question is, how many others like this exist? When we look at the last 100 years of human history, we find something unsettling. Decisive moments always accompanied by new faces, unexpected movements, unexplained rises, individuals who somehow mark a turning point in the world. As if each generation receives its own agent of change. And while the world watches chaos on the surface, somewhere, unseen, the full pattern is already being read. How many important decisions do you believe were made without the world ever knowing? How many wars, economic collapses, technological breakthroughs, and social transformations were guided, permitted, or shaped by forces operating outside public awareness? Perhaps there are no conspiracies in the way we imagine. Perhaps the truth is far more disturbing. Perhaps there is a system, ancient, invisible, silent, a system that simply adapts, reorganizes, and survives. A system that does not need to be seen, does not need to be worshipped, does not need to be feared. It only needs to function. And it uses certain individuals as agents of transition, as pieces on a board far greater than any nation, any ideology, or any visible leader. So the next time you observe the world, the headlines, the global decisions, the names rising to the top, do not only ask, who is this? Ask instead, what pattern do they represent? And what are we not being shown? Because once you see the pattern, you can never unsee it. And the most unsettling truth of all is this. If this pattern is real, if it has existed for centuries, then somewhere in the world, right now, another figure is being prepared, not to be famous, not to be loved, not to be remembered, but to fulfill a role when the exact moment arrives. The world is not only ruled by what is visible, it is shaped by what happens in silence. And what we have always called coincidence may have always been a design. This documentary was only the doorway. You decide whether to step through it, or to keep believing that everything is random,